Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Jane the Virgin, Season 1, Episode 10, Chapter 10. In this episode, we've got a hurricane on our hands, ladies and gentlemen, and this forces people together or apart, depending on what the plot requires, in ways that are really contrived, but in a delightful way. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Claire for commissioning this episode. What's up, Claire? I am so excited about the direction that things are going, you guys. This is such a weird episode in a lot of ways. I'm gonna try and kind of do what I did last time. So the last episode, I sort of handled things according to character, and instead of going like beat by beat through the way the episode itself is set up. And I feel like that worked pretty well for me managing to talk about the things that I'm interested in for each character, instead of the plot. You know what I mean? Like, I care about the characters here, which is, in my opinion, the way it should be with a story like this. And so handling it that way, instead of just like following along with the beats on the show, was more satisfying. So I think I'm going to do that again. So we start off this episode with the flashback to Jane she's getting like top grades in all of her classes. She's a real goody two-shoes. I can't be mad at that, though. I was very much the same way. I love the fact that she mentions that she spelled amphitheater with the British spelling, and so she's going to contest it. That literally happened to me. I literally spelled something with the R-E instead and got it marked wrong, and then I showed them in the book that I was reading that it was spelled that way, and they were like, well, okay. But they were obviously very salty about it. Oh, Claire's here. Hey, Claire. What's up? Although maybe not for the full, you got here like pretty much as I'm starting, so you're good. But she's sitting there and her mother is like, all right, hon, very good. Here's your dinner. And she scoops some macaroni onto her plate. Now, I don't know what this is supposed to be, but I am going to go ahead and say that it's supposed to be Kraft mac and cheese. And it's watery and just so upsetting to look at. And you guys know the way I am about food. If this isn't Kraft mac, I'm willing to give it more of a, I don't know what I genuinely, looking at this, I couldn't figure it out. But, oh my God, my heart ached. There's nothing like a badly made meal that you have to pretend to like. Like, I just hate it so much. Oh my God. So at this moment, her mother pulls out a flyer that Jane had in her bag, and it says that they're doing like a Heritage Day, and to have people in your family make something to bring that reflects your heritage. And she gets really excited, and Shamara does, and is like, why didn't you tell me about this? And Jane has to be like, I forgot. And I was just like, oh no, what's going to happen? It turns out, long story short, that Jane prayed using her grandmother's rosary beads that the Heritage Day food wouldn't be a disaster, and her mother overheard. So Shamara goes to Alba, who I called Alma last episode, I'm so sorry, and asks her to teach a method of making, I think it's empanadas is what she winds up going with. And it's really cute because I guess that to this day, Jane doesn't realize that her mother overheard. And so she kind of just thinks it was like pure fate that made, not fate, it was God. But, then there's also the argument about maybe God got Shamara over to the door to overhear so that this is how it would go. Who knows? But all that to say, I just love every time I see Shamara like doing another thing to try and care for her daughter and make her proud. It's just always so sweet and cute, and the shock on young Jane's face when they're actually like at Heritage Day and she takes a bite and they're really fucking good. Delightful. I have empanada. There are many different ways to make empanadas depending on like what country, and the one that Jane took a bite out of was like a bigger, flatter type that looked like it had more of a pastry exterior. The ones that I grew up with from Colombia have a cornmeal like dough on the outside. And sometimes they're baked, but the ones I grew up with are deep fried and they're filled with potato and beef usually and onion. And y'all, those things are so goddamn good. I swear to you. It's like they're so simple and they come with this like onion vinegar sauce to pour in them. Oh, my mouth is watering. I want them so bad. It just gave me a really bad craving. And there's a brand new Colombian restaurant that just like moved into our neighborhood. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to have to hit them up pretty soon, I think. So that is the flashback, but we come into the present at the hospital with Jane standing over her grandmother's body. I say that as if she's dead, but it feels like she kind of is because she's totally inert. And Jane, they've been told that it looks like she's going to survive and be okay, but that they don't know when she's going to wake up. And also when she does, whether there are going to be issues with perhaps speech or movement, who knows? If she got a bad enough head injury, it could affect all kinds of things. And of course, in true telenovela fashion, when she wakes up, Alba doesn't remember. I did it again. Alba doesn't remember anything about what happened. All she remembers is the party. Now, I'm willing to pardon this, not just because of the tropiness of it, because of course that's what the show deals in and I'm fine with that, but also the fact that she had been drinking. So, combine those two things together and I'm like, okay, I'll allow it. But, for the moment, Jane is trying to find her rosary and is like, I can't find it, and I saw her put it in her bag, which makes sense because they were going to like an award ceremony, so maybe she was going to sort of be praying for Rogelio, but Jane gets very fixated on getting this rosary and going back to the hotel and finding it wherever it fell. And her mother is like, what are you doing? There's a tropical storm. It's way too dangerous. This is just it's just beads that you got at a flea market. And Jane basically says, Mom, I've got to do something. I have to do I can't just sit here, which, even more than her faith, I think is really what's at the bottom of this, honestly, is like just needing to be doing something, which I totally sympathize with. This is also how I operate usually. So she takes off, and then we have the like person who finds the beads. I can't remember which of the girls she works with it is, but it sort of like hits me in a different way looking back now at the fact that she couldn't find them. And this friend comes up. She's got the really amazing curly hair. And I was sort of thinking, like, is she one of the ones that was on the chopping block? And I think it was down to between her and the blonde friend, Frankie. Is that the blonde's name? But I don't know if that like played into anything, whatever. So Regina, that's her name. So she has these, and she's like thinking that she is going to head back, and she goes upstairs into the lobby, and things are starting to really get bad outside. The doors fly open, and the wind comes in and takes one of the chandeliers down, which honestly, that more than anything made no sense to me. There is no way in hell that something like that just falls from that gust of wind. That's fine. The whole way, in general, this show handles this storm, all of it is absurd. And I think that's kind of the point, you know? Like, there's, like, windows breaking, like, all over the place. If you are a luxury resort in Florida, I just don't see you building a place with, like, regular glass. You build everything with shatterproof glass. You make everything, like, specifically to withstand this type of storm. It's not even a hurricane yet. At this point, we're still in tropical storm territory. So all of this stuff, I'm just like, y'all wouldn't. It'd be fine. However, because we need things to go the way they go, shit has to be tempestuous inside and outside. So we need windows to break, and we need chandeliers to fall at the moment that he's saying, no, you mustn't go outside. It's too dangerous. So they put the hotel on lockdown. And at one point, Rafael has like been left to take care of the hotel in his father's absence. And it was a bit of a fight to get his father to agree, because Lachlan is stuck in, I think he says Key Largo, Montego, baby, when do we go? But he is telling them that they have to like put all of the people who are in the recovery suites to the hospital. And when he mentions the recovery suites, my impression is the recovery suites are supposed to be for people who got their surgery other places. Like, I don't believe Rafael knows absolutely fucking anything about what's going on in those tunnels. But as we do find out, there are secret operations happening, and that those probably some of the people in the recovery suites are criminals who are on the run. So, and the recovery suite thing, this is something that I find really fascinating, you guys, because when I was planning for the wedding, and I was really starting to feel a little bit more self-conscious about my age in my face, I was looking at like different procedures, like low-level things, to sort of like freshen up certain areas and see how much it cost and whether or not I could do anything. And I did a thread lift, and it did absolutely nothing and was horrifically painful. So I would never recommend it. And it was like really expensive. Like, it was not, it's actually on the cheaper side for this sort of thing, but I would absolutely never have done it if I knew how pointless it was going to be. However, the whole concept of plastic surgery is often talked about like you just get brought in like a piece of clay and they just carve away a thing and then it's all done. And we don't really talk about the recovery process. And the place that I went to get the thread lifts, I had been following them on Facebook, not Facebook, Instagram. And they were doing these new things to help women recover from Brazilian butt lifts. And so they started posting pictures and video of the procedure to like help the recovery process. And it was such an absolute horror show, you guys. I really wish that we were a little bit more open with that part of plastic surgery and how your body that you live in, that is your friend from birth, you are cutting it into pieces and stuffing things in there. And it's just weird and creepy when you step back and like look at what your body has to do to heal from that kind of trauma. And this is not me hating on plastic surgery on GP, because as I said, I tried a thread lift. I'm not against this sort of thing, but I think it's like really seen as a matter of course for a lot of people, and nobody really who hasn't had it done fully appreciates the brutality of what getting this sort of work done actually entails. And the recovery process is humiliating. Like, there's just a lot about it that's just so undignified and ugly. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that because the recovery suite thing, I kept forgetting that it was mentioned in another part of the last episode. I think Petra says that one of the actresses that was in that awards show was in the recovery suites. So she managed to talk her into having the after party at the hotel. But the whole thing here is, Rafael is getting Jane to stay and not head back to the hotel. He tells her, text me if you need absolutely anything. And the thing that she doesn't know at this point is that his father has already told him that there are going to be layoffs, and they're having to lower the overall budget by 15%. And it's such a perfect juxtaposition. He is on the phone talking with this woman, or who knows who he was talking to, but he's talking to somebody that Rose overhears about how they're going to need $5 million. And I don't know if that's part of the cutback, is that he is doing that to raise the money for whatever it is he's doing. But the knowledge that he needs that amount of money and these people are losing their livelihoods, these regular people, is just so infuriating. So this brings us to the scene where Jane's friends all talk to her about what's going on with the layoffs and how they heard the rumor, and can Jane do anything? And I have got to tell you guys, this bothered me so much. I really did appreciate in the end that Jane apologizes to Rafael, but I really wish her friends had apologized to her. Because while I totally understand, I think it's Frankie who says, look, I get it that you're in a weird position here, but you suddenly have a rich baby daddy and a rich father-in-law. You're going to be okay. And none of us have that kind of safety net. And that is a completely valid thing to point out. And I am this is a privilege, and that is a sympathetic position. I totally understand. But they're putting it on Jane that they're getting fired, in a way that I found really gross and really unsympathetic. Yeah, she wound up with a rich baby daddy by accident through a kind of trauma that she went through that she didn't ask for. And her engagement blew up in her face very recently. And yeah, she's seeing this guy, but she is going through it right now. And so for everybody to just be well, your life is going to be fine, I'm sure that she won't wind up suffering any sort of setback like what you guys are going to. And I understand that that's not fair, but also expecting her to be able to swoop in and tell Rafael who to fire and not because you're her friend. Do you not see that that's the exact thing you're accusing her? Everybody is well, you're not getting fired. And she says something about how she's only taken 4 sick days in 3 years and she's on time every day. And her friend says something keep telling yourself that. Granted, Jane isn't not getting fired because she's a good worker. She's not getting fired because she's with Rafael. Come on, of course. That said, when Rafael is talking about Frankie and he says she's a new hire and she's been late a lot, there are certainly good reasons to be late, but he's using actual data to back this up. And I don't know why Frankie is acting if you're a newer hire, how close are you with her in the first place? How well does Jane know you that you feel she owes you something here? And if you are willing to keep your job just because you're friends with her, then why are you going to kind of throw it in her face that she's keeping her job just because she's with Rafael? You want to profit off of the exact same thing. But the difference is she doesn't have that kind of pull, and she shouldn't. Like, it would be really weird. So anyway, it just really, the whole storyline here really bothered me. And the moment where one of her friends, she says something like, there was nothing I could do. And her friend says something like, wow, you really have changed. What the fuck does that mean? Really? No. If anything, she's just as powerless to change this as she was before. So saying you really have changed, she actually hasn't. She's not suddenly the man's wife and like an investor in the property. She is still working here with you. Like, the relationship is the only thing that has changed, and that is very new. And I don't blame Rafael for kind of being like, this is super inappropriate. Like, why are you even looking at this list? She shouldn't have looked, but her friends shouldn't have asked and put pressure on her and made her feel like she was like a bad person for not wanting to get involved. I felt like it was so unreasonable. Anyway, this is something that I always have to do with the show. Whenever we have something that's like played a certain way that I really don't agree with, I need to spend like extra time on. It's sort of like the same thing as with Michael and some of the ways that he tried to talk to Jane, and it feeling like it was not being addressed well enough to me in the show. I just can't imagine, if I were in her friend's position, holding it against her in any way that I'm being laid off. It's certainly understandable to be a little bit resentful of the fact that she is safe and you are not, but she's also about to have a child that she didn't plan for and didn't particularly want up until recently. And if you want to go get knocked up by Rafael in order to keep your job, then be my guest, I guess. Lauren says, also, if we know anything about Jane, she's very righteous and would never have asked for special treatment for anyone. Yeah, and this is the thing. It's like, she is apparently good at her job. And so I have to think that even if she weren't dating Rafael, she probably would have gotten to keep her place, because she is somebody who is like very committed, and you know, this stuff matters in the end. They got to like crunch numbers to a degree. Anyway, I just, you know, I get very twitchy whenever there's parts of a story where people behave as if somebody owes them, or like, you know what I mean? In this sort of way that feels to me, entitled isn't exactly the right word. It's more like they're taking something personally that isn't personal, and that they're making personal in a way that I don't think is genuine, because they just want to try and manipulate the other person. That's the part of it that I think feels so gross to me, is like, I'm not even sure they really believe what they're saying, except that they're pissy, they're losing their job, and they need to take out their irritation on somebody, and Jane is a convenient receptacle for that, you know? So anyway, this whole thing results in, I think Frankie is gone, but the other woman, I think it's Regina, is the other woman with the kid who doesn't get fired, because it's down between her and Frankie. But yeah, the fact that Jane keeps being put in this position bugged me. So, all right. Then we have, I'm going through all of Jane, like I mentioned earlier. This awful thing that happens with her grandmother, she winds up like talking to her mother about it via the, what do you call it? Walkie-talkie that Michael has later. She runs into Michael and Rafael in the lobby first, and Michael has found this weird surgical suite that it takes them a little while to figure out what the point is of it. But it turns out it is for plastic surgery. They were sort of thinking, I think initially, that maybe it was for like organ harvesting or something. But there are chips of bone, and that isn't something that would happen if you were just doing like illegal boob implants or organ harvesting. So Michael is so sure that Rafael knows all about this. And it is so fucking annoying. I was really relieved when finally Nadine speaks up and is like, I feel like it's a lot more likely that his father is the one. I'm like, thank you. Why would you think the son, who like is barely even allowed to have control of the hotel, is the one who is behind all of this stuff, when his father is really the actual owner and investor? And you know what I mean? Like, it's because Michael wants it to be Rafael. And so he's getting really aggressive in some ways that are almost embarrassing. He is enjoying it so much, and knowing how much he is enjoying it when he is so wrong is like, it's cringe is the word, as the kids say. It's super cringe. And Rafael, for his part, because I believe he's telling the truth when he says he doesn't know anything about any of this, he is just disgusted with the way that Michael is behaving, and just is obviously like, you're being so childish and this is so pathetic. And that kind of contempt is rolling off him. And I have to say, the actor who plays Rafael, I think, does a way better job of giving Michael a look that sears. Like, Michael, there's just something about him that feels sort of like weak, you know? I don't know. And so when he kind of gets in Raphael's face, there's a sense for me of like a 9-year-old versus a 16-year-old. It just feels like, you're not really on the right level to be doing this, my guy. Like, you know? And I just really felt like, looking back at this at some point, Michael, you're going to be so embarrassed. But maybe he won't. I don't know. But regardless, Jane like interrupts this conversation, and Michael is just like, maybe you don't want to talk about this in front of Jane, to which Rafael is like, Jane can stay right here because there's nothing to talk about. I don't even know what you're referencing. And this leads to later on, Jane, when she's in the elevator and it stops, tropey trope, Michael is trying to be like, well, you know, there's a whole thing going on with Rafael and him knowing things. And she finally is just like, oh my God, can you stop? This is absurd. I can't handle it all. And she starts talking like in sort of a what do you call that when it's like just off the top of your head? She's just like spewing all of the things that are going on, and then says something about her abuela in the hospital. And stream of consciousness, that's the word I want. And Michael stops her and is like, wait, what happened? And she tells him, and that she, like, because of the phone lines and everything, the service, that she hasn't been able to get through, so she doesn't know what's going on. And his walkie-talkie will connect with somebody in the hospital. So this guy who doesn't speak Spanish, Shamara checks, he comes in, gives the walkie-talkie to Shamara, and she tells Jane in Spanish what's going on with the immigration thing. Because as it turns out, and I really appreciated the way the show did this, Alba being illegal got picked up on by the hospital. And they are waiting until things calm down with the storm before they report her for deportation. And the show, you know how they'll have occasionally like the typed subtitles that pop up to describe things in that moment. It has Shamara first arguing with the doctor saying, is that even legal? And then the show subtitle says, yes, this actually happens. Look it up. #immigration reform. And I really, really liked that handling of it. This is something that is super common and actually like weaponized by a lot of people. When I say weaponized, I mean like there are folks out there who will, you know, exploit workers who are undocumented, but then do something like drop them off at a hospital when they know that they're in danger, because that way they don't have to pay them. You know, like this sort of thing is the only things that immigration reform actually does are help folks in power to exploit people more effectively. People who are desperate and who don't have a defense, because there's not a lot that you can do to protect yourself if you are not able to go to authorities. And it's the exact same thing as like with sex work. If you're a sex worker, but somebody like gets violent, you can't go to the cops and report that your John was abusive, because what you're doing is illegal, which is what results in a lot of sex workers being like really badly injured or killed, because they are not able to go to the law. And this is also part of why a lot of sex trafficking is able to flourish, because women who are being trafficked are accused of prostitution, which is not the same thing. And they are considered suspects rather than victims. So a lot of women just don't come forward with their experience because they can't trust that they are going to be seen as a victim. And it's just like, this is the thing about the law. It's all just so, everything is so like puritanical in this way that is unhelpful to everybody involved. And this whole thing with the immigration, like the report happening in the hospital, I have read about this happening a lot. So anyway, Jane, of course, is like just absolutely flipped out by the news that this may happen to her grandmother. And we find out later that Michael stepped up and claimed that her grandmother was a witness in a very important case and that she could not be deported due to that. Now, I don't know what kind of ongoing protection that is. It's the way that the doctor talks about it to Shamara later is he says something like, all of that went away. And I'm hoping that this means that it's just never going to be brought up or mentioned ever again. But I'm really concerned that it's going to turn out that Michael has to prove that she is actually a witness, or else they will take her after all. Like, I just, I don't know how permanent this is and whether or not she's going to be able to actually get papers, because that process, when you have lived here illegally for a while, that can be really, really hard. People talk all the time about just come here legally. If you have never tried to do that, shut the fuck up. And I mean that from the depths of my soul. Immigrating to the United States as a non-rich, especially Hispanic Latina person, is really hard. And if you are in the position where you are in danger in any way and you need to get out, that shit could take up to a decade. Easy. Like, easy. It is just the most drawn out. And again, having money helps tremendously with that process. Of course, so the people who like are in the least danger a lot of the time are the ones that are able to come over the most easily. So anyway, I'm not going to keep talking about this, but I just wanted to mention it. And I appreciate Michael specifically telling Shamara not to tell Jane that he did this, because he's like, she's just going to think I did this in order to win her back. And he is correct. However, there's a part of me that is like, she's going to find out. And then the fact that he didn't tell her is going to work in his favor. And I can't help but feel like he kind of knows that and is preparing for this to hit even harder somehow. But that's just because I think I'm predisposed at this point not to really trust Michael in any sense, which is a shame. But there it is. Meanwhile, Rogelio has been here trying to support Shamara, who is understandably really upset. And I love, he says that he like called somebody from the UN and he also called Gloria Estefan. And he says one of them will take care of it, most likely Gloria Estefan. And he has a swag bag with him. And it's like the way it's designed, it's so funny. I don't know what these normally look like. I've always pictured like either a really simple like shopping bag sort of look, or that you get all of your stuff in like a Birkin, like the bag itself is one of the big gifts. But it looks almost like a cartoon, like money bag. Like all it needs is a money sign on the front of it. And it's talked about how this is like something that celebrities get is free gifts, and they're the people who need free shit the absolute least. Oh my God, you guys, that just boils my blood so bad. I know what it's about. Like the whole idea of luxury goods being tied to celebrity names, and hopefully they will share a Instagram post about them using the thing. But I just cannot with rich people getting free shit. It just makes me so fucking enraged. Anyway, but yeah, there's not a whole lot with Shamara this episode up until the very end of right up until the very end, where she is praying to God that if he will just preserve her mother and help her wake up and make everything okay, that she will live a chaste life and won't have sex again unless there's a ring on her finger. That's a really big promise you made there, Shamara. That feels like a lot. And granted, you're bargaining for your mother's life. I respect the fact that you feel you've got to really pony up here and put something significant on the table. Nevertheless, oh, wow, that's a lot. So her mother like wakes up partially as she's making this prayer, pretends that she hasn't. And then when she does wake up, like, and lets Shamara see her, she's like kind of keeping an eye on things. And she sees how Shamara hugs Rogelio, but then kind of like pushes him away. And it's clear that she's like thinking about the promise she made. And Alba is very pleased. Like, she looks like, yeah, this is exactly what I wanted. And I think the implication is supposed to be that even though she was awake when she heard Shamara praying, she pretended not to in order to kind of trick Shamara into making this promise. Except I don't really know how she could have realized what the promise was that she was making. I don't know. But the fact that she sort of pretended to not be fully awake, maybe she just wanted Shamara to finish articulating exactly what it was that she meant. Because, like, Alba had started to understand the direction that the prayer was going. But yeah, I feel a little bit bad because, like, here's the thing. It comes down to the fact that I don't think refraining from sex is an inherently noble thing. I don't think premarital sex is a bad thing. So for me, the fact that Alba is like sort of decided to like trick her daughter into this promise, it feels like still so judgmental in a way of Shamara. And it feels like Shamara judging herself as well. Her saying like, I'll live a better life. I'll be a better person. And no man will get between these legs without a ring on my finger. It feels like Shamara being like, I'm not good now, but I can be good. And I get that this is part of the thing, the fundamental like view of the show. But I hated to see her kind of approach herself that way. You know what I mean? Like, it just felt like she was being, so there was like sort of self-loathing tied in with it. And I just hated that. So for me, her making this promise and committing to it, and her mother like being awake and letting her do it, it felt like I'm also thinking that you aren't that like doing the right thing and judging you for it. So I don't know. The whole thing kind of, I feel like it's supposed to be a lot more lighthearted, and I just felt kind of gross about it. if that makes sense. And I understand where it's supposed to be coming from, but like, that's part of the problem. Yeah, Lauren is in the chat saying that Catholic guilt. Yeah, 100%. Like, it just, the whole thing just sort of left a bad taste in my mouth. That's all I'm going to say about it. But, and I think that part of it is Shamara is just a naturally sexual person. And there is so nothing wrong with that. That the idea of her fighting against her own impulse, fighting who she is, for the sake of this like goofy promise, it feels like reverting to like teens, you know, and being, trying to pretend to be something you're not. Like, she is at an age where I was hoping she could just embrace who she is and what she likes. And it feels like she still can't do that. And I hate that for her. So, all that said, let's back up here, because I feel like I have talked about most things with Jane, and we've talked about like the deal with her friends getting fired and everything, and that's kind of, I'm trying to make sure that I haven't missed anything there, but that's pretty much it with Jane. Really quickly, I'm going to just touch on Rafael's sister. So Rose goes to visit her, and this is so weird. So talk about, you know, the storm and how that shit wouldn't work the way it does. But I don't really understand exactly what the deal is supposed to be with the mental hospital, because Rose can apparently kind of like come and go, and there's, pun intended, but she spends the night basically, which, is this allowed? This is something that's allowed? Like, what? The whole way that this goes is so odd to me. I don't understand what's happening here. But all this to say, like, Rose is in an adjacent room when her husband, and remind me guys, what is Rafael's father's name and what is his sister's name? I always forget his sister's name. But his father is in the other room, and he's on the phone talking about how he needs $5 million for something, and it's like a name. It's something like Antonia. I feel like it starts with an A. And the way he's talking, he seems really agitated. But when he comes out, he tries to tell Rose, I was just talking to my driver. He's waiting downstairs. And he keeps on like emphasizing how even though the weather is bad, he still has to make this particular flight, that whatever's going on is like super important and all of this stuff. And Rose has already like low-key kind of been what is the urgency here? It's a fucking storm. You shouldn't be flying. Like, what are you doing? And so when she overhears this conversation, Luisa is the sister. Thank you, April. Dad is Emilio. Okay. Rowan, Luisa, and Mr. Solano. That's actually not a bad thing. I could go to Mr. Solano if I ever forget it. That's saying that I remember Rafael's last name, though, and I'm not sure I will always do that either. But Rose overhears this and is beginning to think that maybe some shit is not entirely kosher with this guy. So she goes and she talks at first to, who does she talk to first? Does she talk to Rafael first? But I'm just going to boil it down because I don't want to get too lost in this, but she finds out the name is the name of a house that he has in Croatia, which is a country that does not have an extradition treaty with the United States. So it is a place that criminals will flee to. And once she realizes this and starts to hear about like some of the other stuff going on in the hotel and the murders on top of it all, she thinks that maybe he is Sin Rostro. And she goes to Rafael and presents this theory to him. And the episode sort of ends when she has this like she said this to him, but I was really glad because it hadn't occurred to Rafael, of course. And I think his father is kind of an obvious choice to the point where I'm starting to think maybe he's not Sinrostro, but I wouldn't be mad if he was. It's not like being predictable is always a bad thing. You can do predictable and still kind of be surprising depending on how you handle it. But she, in the midst of trying to find this information out, she goes to see Luisa at the hospital and is sort of like playing this role. Like, first of all, I'm so sorry I did this to you. I panicked. And Luisa rightfully is just like, get fucked. Leave now. And just like kind of freaks out on her. And the whole time Rose is presenting this like, you know, it's 2000 whatever and I'm still afraid to admit that I would rather be with a woman. And I'm like, that's super duper not what's going on here though, dude. And she is acting like she actually wants to be with Luisa, which I don't think Luisa actually fell for a second, to be honest. I think that she is well aware that this woman is sort of playing her, but doesn't really know how. I may be wrong about that. I am not entirely sure what it is that Rose is doing. Is she just trying to get information from Luisa? Or is she just trying to shore up her connection to the Solanos so that if something happens to her husband, she will have a backup? Like, because that was sort of how I was taking this. But then a part of me was like, I don't know if you want a backup within the same family, because if that man is guilty, then probably his family is going to either go down with him or lose a lot of their money. So I don't know how helpful it will be. But the whole thing, it's just, I really hate watching the way that Rose can lie. It's just so uncomfortable. She's so gross to Luisa. And Luisa, she spots a dragonfly brooch that Rose is wearing on her jacket. And she's like, basically, I guess, just gonna fuck Rose right in front of her roommate, because it seems like there is no effort made for privacy whatsoever. But the whole thing is meant to be that she's gonna take the dragonfly pin and use that to pick the lock and get out. And again, I don't really know how, like, she's the way that this whole hospital works is so weird that I'm like, I don't know, maybe that's how it works here, because the fact that Rose could stay the night already, I'm just like, that doesn't really sound like something they'd do. But then just being able to pick a lock and you're suddenly out. What is this, 1920? Like, everything is operated with automatic locks that you need a card to get through. Like, how? This doesn't feel like anything. I'm just going to say that. The episode, like, for Luisa ends on that note of her saying, what do you know about picking locks? And I was just like, who cares what she knows about picking locks? That's not going to help you. You're in a medical facility that, while not necessarily like super high tech, I'm sure at the very least has like remote locks and stuff. So whatever. They just need to have a whole thing with her like having to escape a thing. But it just feels like nobody thought through anything about this. So that's the whole thing with Luisa and Rose. I'm really glad that it's been presented to Rafael that his father is Sinrostro. And I'm really wondering if that's going to influence any of the encounters that he has with Michael from now on. Because his dad is gone by now. I'm pretty sure he has managed to fucking take off. So if not, he's on the edge of it. All right, so let's back up and we'll talk about Petra. She has, first of all, I think, no idea that her mother shoved Alba down the stairs. I'm pretty sure she has no concept of any of that. I'm not sure if this is something that would ever, like, what's his name? Is it Ivan? This guy he was there for Alba trying to come into the room and yelling for help. But I don't know if it would ever come up in conversation with him. And I mean, when is he going to get a chance to talk to Petra and mention? Somebody tried to get in, actually. Do you know that? Like, I feel like if that gets mentioned, that maybe Petra is going to start to ask some more questions about what happened and maybe put together Alba. But as of right now, I don't think that she even knows Alba's in the hospital or anything. I would like to know who found Alba and exactly how that all went down, because that's also a factor. But anyway, so she talks to Rafael first, and she brings up that she just wants her prenup money and then she'll be gone and out of his hair. And Rafael says, the prenup was signed by Petra, and you are not Petra, so no, you're not getting anything. And to her credit, Petra is like, kind of like, look, I know I don't deserve this money, but I haven't got anything. And she starts to tell him about Milos and that she's running from a bad man. And Rafael does not believe her, and I do not blame him at all. This woman is such a good liar. It's just impossible to know when she's telling the truth and when not. And her lies have been so outlandish and so over the top and seemed so true and sincere. Why would you believe her at this point? Of course you wouldn't. The thing that I wanted Petra to do was bring in her mother to back her up and explain with the scar on her face and everything what happened there. But Petra can't exactly bring her mother into things right now because of the fact that they have a hostage in their room, and handling all of that would be like a really delicate matter. So she is left with no money, and it looks like she's going to get nothing. And she is proposing that she will sell all of her jewelry, which is the kind of thing that sounds like a decent plan until you start getting quotes on what your jewelry is actually worth. And guys, I will tell you, and this is not representative of anything like what quality of jewelry Petra has necessarily, but nevertheless, the engagement ring that I got from my ex-husband, it was 3 diamonds in a diamond band. It cost him about $2,500 when he bought it. And I sold it to a jeweler, not a pawn shop, a jeweler. The best price I got after visiting multiple places was $350. So, like, you can sell your jewelry. I hope you have a lot of it. And I hope it's like the kind of quality that is just beyond belief, because otherwise you're really not going to get what you need, you know? And she says something to her mom about how they'll get like a little 1-bedroom, and her mom is like, yeah, that's super duper not going to cut it. And I'm like, yeah, I don't see that either. You guys are going to kill each other. So then we have the whole thing with the window breaking in the storm. And Ivan sees this glass on the floor, and it's such a funny moment, you guys, because the window breaks and it's this big crash. And I'm sorry, but you aren't going to be in the bathroom connected to the room where this happened and not hear anything. But this huge crash happens, and then you just hear Petra's mom yell from the bathroom, "Petra, is that you with the TP?" And I'm just like, guys, come on. You're telling me she wouldn't have heard this? And evidently, she's just like stuck in the bathroom, I guess is the implication, waiting for it. So she can't come out, I suppose. But it doesn't matter, because in the end, Petra comes back to the room and he has her mother with the glass shard at her throat and tells Petra, "I want your jewelry. and then I'm going to go, or I'm going to kill your mom. And Petra, basically, she knows she has a gun, like, right there if she can reach it. And she tries to figure out how to play it. And she decides to do the whole, go ahead and kill her. You know what? I need to start over. And you've seen the way she talks to me. And it's very convincing. And her mom picks up on what she's doing immediately because they have operated together for a while. And the whole thing goes beautifully. And her mom winds up, like, I think she nails Ivan in the crotch. And Petra gets the gun out. Now, the whole way that this goes, because he says something about how earlier, why don't you just let me go and I'll never tell Milos that I was here. And I still have my suspicions about the connection with Milos to begin with, you know? So I was sort of feeling like, I don't even know that you would be able to do that. But the way that this scene wraps up, she grabs the gun. He is holding onto his crotch and says, my jewels, and runs into the next room. She's holding the gun, but she didn't shoot him. And he disappears through the doorway as Petra just looks at her mother and says, now what? But her mother doesn't answer. And I don't know what to do with this guy either. Like, he is still... He is not in the next scene when she's talking to her about, like, what they're going to do in selling the jewelry. There are a bunch of people in the room to deal with the broken window. But this guy gets away, I guess. And, like, I don't understand why Petra doesn't chase after him. She just lets him run and, like, looks at her mom. And you have the gun on him. I mean, does she think that if she goes out into the hallway, like, just let's say, for instance, she chases him. She runs out into the hallway. She has the gun. She's training it on him and tells him to stop. Is the thought process that he knows good and damn well she's not pulling the trigger in the hallway because this is too public? Is he that certain that she wouldn't do it? Like, she could easily take him into the stairwell and do it. There's possibilities here for her. So I don't really understand why she just stands there and lets him run. It's a really weird moment. And I understand not shooting him in the room, because then what do you do? Like, how do you deal with that? But making no effort to pursue him or really stop him even was just strange. This episode is just full of moments that I felt like this doesn't really work, and I'm letting it all slide because I'm enjoying myself. But when you take certain parts by themselves and look at them, it's like, yeah, this doesn't really make a lot of sense. They just need this guy to escape and be like, for Milos to be on their tracks. And I feel like there had to have been a more elegant way for this to happen. You know, there's a part of me that's like wondering if her mother didn't, I keep thinking about her mother being in league with this guy somehow. And I don't really feel like that really makes any sense. I'm going to be honest with you guys, but it's just like, I don't know. There's something not right about this whole fucking thing. I don't know. So anyway, yeah, the episode pretty much, like, with the two of them ends with them talking about what they're going to do and Milos chasing them. So backing up, talking about Michael, I mostly talked about him already in the context of finding the surgical suite, and their superior is really impressed with their good old-fashioned detective work, which was accidentally, we opened this because we were fucking. And he is more certain than ever that Rafael knows what's going on in the hotel, to the point where he kind of does manage to get into Jane's head, and she starts asking Rafael some pointed questions, and he has to be like, do you hear yourself? Which I really did appreciate him being like, Jane, come on. But the whole thing between Michael and his partner is so odd because obviously Nadine is like completely willing to keep it super cash. Nadine does not care about Michael in a real way, as far as I can tell. But the fact that like he reacts to her starting to undress him in the previous episode, like, what are you doing? Like the one time they had sex, I think he has been feeling like that was a one-time thing and it's never going to happen again. So I think he seemed almost surprised that she was initiating again. And I'm starting to wonder, like, is this going to turn into more of a thing between the two of them? And what will Jane think when she finds out? She will find out. You just can't hide this sort of thing. She'll find out. Whether because she walks in on them, because Michael spills something by accident, because Nadine says something to Jane. I could see Nadine starts to get pretty impatient with Michael this episode about the fact that he is so sure it's Rafael. And meanwhile, Nadine is like, dude, come on. It's not Rafael. Will you stop? Like, it's so clear to her that this is a vendetta thing that I wouldn't be surprised if Nadine told Jane, Michael's been fucking me, by the way, so that she could close the door on that chapter and hope to get Michael to concentrate. The thing is that if she did that, I don't know how Michael ever works with her again, you know? So, but I guess good luck trying to get her off this case because they're really working it together. So maybe he couldn't say no to working with her. I don't know how that would even happen, but it wouldn't be an amicable setup. Or she could orchestrate it that Jane walks in. I don't know. I'm making Nadine out to be a little bit of a snake, and I'm not sure that's fair. I don't know about Nadine very well, you know, but she seems very much to be I'm going to do what I need to do kind of girl because of the way that she talked to, she like let something slip, I think, to Rafael about Petra. She doesn't say Petra, but she says, we think he had a woman here. And he says Zaz didn't have a girlfriend. And she says that we know of and gives him a look. And that was her telling him a little bit more than she was really supposed to. And so, you know, she did that because she was sort of wanting to like nudge things along in a certain direction. And Michael didn't want her to do that for his reasons. Maybe she would do that with Jane too. I don't know. But the episode ends in this way, you guys, where Michael has just got done talking to Shamara about the phone call he made on Alba's behalf, not to tell Jane about it. And the Shamara says, you still love her, don't you? And he says, we belong together. I'm not giving up on us. I really believe that. And then the narrator says, and he did believe that. And he continued to believe it until the day of his death and his last breath. Something like that. So we're getting a death. Michael is going to die. When? Who knows? But that's very clearly like setting it up. And I'm like, low-key, that's brilliant. I am the kind of person who foreshadowing can go one way or another, and it depends. This is the sort of thing that if you are setting this up, that he is going to die, and you don't deliver on this for like 2 seasons, I'm going to be looking at you a little bit. I'm going to be looking at you. However, I don't know how it's going to pan out. And as of right now, I love this. This is something that, that Stephen King does a lot, is he will drop a flat out sentence about the future and let it sit and ferment in your brain. And it will amp up the tension in everything. Because the thing is, as of right now, Michael does not seem to be somebody who is in danger, right? Like, if you watch him in any scenario where he would ostensibly be in danger, as a viewer, there is this just in-depth confidence that he has plot armor and there is nothing to worry about, and so you won't ever really be that concerned about him. But if you drop this sentence about how he's going to die, then every time anything happens to him, you're thinking, is this it? Oh, wait, is this it? Wait, is this it? So I think it's a really smart method of like just ratcheting things up. But that said, you've got to like have the payoff really be a payoff, because otherwise it can just feel like a trick, you know? So we'll have to see. Rowan says, there's so much happening on this show all the time that even if something is foreshadowed, you'll probably forget. True, but that's a pretty big one. I don't know. We'll see. But I feel like we'll see. And there's also a part of me that's just kind of like, well, good. I don't like Michael. At this point, I'm done with Michael. He's irritating me. So if we're going to kill him off, like I'm all for it. I hope it's good. I hope it's a good payoff. You know, it'd be really funny though, is if they didn't kill him off and he just like got involved in shit and then wound up getting crazy plastic surgery. And Lauren says, you're right to point out so many weird motivations and happenings this episode. I'll just say some things are intentional and some you just have to suspend disbelief. Noted. Yeah, and like I said, you guys, I'm fine with that because this show is... I won't call the show actually campy, but it's like dancing on the edge to a point where I'm like fine with it, you know, with things like not quite lining up. But when you get enough of them in a row, you do start to be like, wait a second. And of course, even if I am okay with it, I have to point it out. I have to just mention it. Yeah, I think that's about everything this episode. So when we start off this next one, how many more episodes are there this season? I just realized that I have no earthly idea. I think about this show having like 15 episodes a season. Oh my God, there's 22. Wow, we're not even halfway through. These are long ass seasons. I didn't realize that. I'm not even halfway yet. Next episode will be halfway. Word. Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to it. All right, everybody. I am going to wrap up, but thank you very much, Claire, for commissioning this, and glad to have you in the chat as well. Thank you, Lauren, for commissioning the last one. Thank you, Rowan, for hanging out as well. And April, I think, was also here. But yeah, this was I recorded 3 times today, and this is the first one that people were at. Normally I have people at all my recordings, but the first 2, dead silence. So it was nice for there to be some chat in here. All right, everybody. I will be seeing you soon with a new one. And until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.